America is full of mysterious places, but one of the most chilling is Lake Lanier in Georgia. This body of water claims dozens of lives each year, and eyewitnesses frequently report strange occurrences. This story is just one of many terrifying incidents that have taken place in its dark waters. Before Lake Lanier was created, the land it now covers belonged to the Cherokee people. According to their legends, an ancient burial ground once stood in the area, guarded by the spirits of their ancestors. When white settlers began building a dam, Cherokee shamans warned them, "You will awaken those who must not be disturbed." After the area was flooded, locals began reporting strange shadows moving beneath the water and people vanishing without a trace. According to legend, the spirits of the Cherokee continue to protect their land, and those who disturb them become part of the lake forever. In 1959, a young engineer named Thomas Bennett was inspecting a newly built bridge spanning Lake Lanier. He and his team discovered bizarre structural issues. Parts of the foundation appeared to have been corroded by something inexplicable. One night, while staying behind on the bridge, Bennett heard a strange sound. Something was calling his name from beneath the water. The next morning, his body was found drowned. But something was unusual. His skin was unnaturally pale, and his eyes were wide open, as if he had seen something terrifying in his final moments. Since then, workers who have reconstructed the bridge report hearing voices, footsteps, and even seeing shadowy figures walking on the water. In 1987, a group of teenagers went to Lake Lanier for a late-night picnic. Among them was 17-year-old Brian Carter, a fan of urban legends and the paranormal. That night, he decided to take a walk along the shore to see if the lake was as dangerous as people claimed. He hadn't gone far from the fire when he heard a strange splash. Turning around, he saw a figure standing waist-deep in the water. It moved slowly, but its body didn't seem to be touching the surface. It appeared to hover above it. Brian froze, but suddenly, the figure rushed toward him. Panicked, he tried to run but slipped and fell. His friends, hearing his screams, rushed to help, but they saw nothing, only a terrified Brian gasping for breath. He told them that something had tried to pull him into the water. A few days later, he was found drowned in the lake, even though that night he had never returned to the water. In 1972, a diver named Mark Davis was hired to inspect the underwater remains of the old Lanier Bridge. As he descended into the depths, he suddenly felt something tugging at his leg. He assumed he had gotten caught in an old fishing net, but then he felt an icy breath behind him. Turning around, he saw the face of a woman with empty black eyes. Her mouth opened, but instead of a scream, only bubbles escaped. In a panic, Mark swam frantically toward the surface. When he emerged, his colleagues noticed he was as pale as a corpse. He refused to dive again and abandoned the project. Years later, he confessed that every night he heard a voice calling him, as if from beneath the water. In October 2005, a group of tourists set out for a boat trip on Lake Lanier. They planned to spend the night on the water, enjoying the silence and fresh air. However, the next morning, their boat was found drifting near the shore, completely empty. Investigators discovered that all of the tourists' belongings were still in place, but not a single body was found. The only clue was a diary entry left behind on the boat by one of the tourists. "We hear someone calling our names. Someone is walking on the water." Their disappearance remains an unsolved mystery to this day. In 1994, a truck driver named Roy Collins was driving across the Lanier Bridge late at night. Suddenly, a figure of a woman in a blue dress appeared in front of his truck. Roy slammed on the brakes and jumped out of the cab, but there was no one there. The only thing he noticed was a trail of wet footprints leading straight into the water. As he got back into his truck, he felt the temperature inside drop suddenly. Glancing at his rearview mirror, he caught a glimpse of a pale face. After that night, he swore never to drive across that bridge again. In 2019, two brothers, 22-year-old Alex and 26-year-old Michael Rogers, went on a night fishing trip at Lake Lanier. They had often spent time there despite the rumors of a curse. To them, the ghost stories were nothing more than tales meant to scare tourists. They arrived by boat around 10 p.m., heading toward one of the lake's deepest spots. The night was moonless, and the gentle wind barely rippled the water's surface. Everything was calm until they heard the first strange sound, a faint splash, as if someone had stepped into the water nearby. "Did you hear that?" Alex asked, turning his head toward the noise. "Just a fish," Michael chuckled, casting his line. The next moment, something began thrashing in the water. They saw the outline of a figure, as if someone was standing waist-deep in the lake, but it was too dark to make out the details. Then the figure vanished. Alex grabbed a flashlight, but the beam revealed nothing, just the dark water, as calm as before. "Maybe someone went for a midnight swim," Michael suggested, but his voice wavered. They continued fishing, but the sense of unease lingered. Suddenly the boat began drifting, despite the motor being off. It felt as if something beneath the water was pulling it deeper into the lake. The water around them swirled into strange whirlpools, and the air temperature dropped sharply. Then, something grabbed Alex's wrist. He screamed, yanking his arm back, and saw marks on his skin, fingerprints, but cold and slimy, as if a drowned hand had clutched him. The boat tilted, and Michael lost his balance, toppling into the water. Alex rushed to the edge, reaching out to pull his brother up, but Michael had disappeared beneath the surface. A few seconds later, he resurfaced, his eyes wide with terror. "Something is pulling me under," he screamed. Alex grabbed for his brother's hand, but an unseen force dragged Michael down again. Without hesitation, Alex dove after him, plunging into the icy darkness. But under the water, there was nothing, just murky blackness and bubbles. Minutes later, local fishermen found Alex washed up on shore. He was in shock, unable to remember how he had ended up on land. Michael was never found. After the disappearances of Michael, Brian, Sarah, and the terrifying story of Mark, people became afraid to swim in the lake. Locals claimed to see shadows moving beneath the water, hear voices calling out, and feel icy touches on their legs. Alex was never free of the nightmares. He swore never to return to the lake, but deep down, he knew one thing: Lanier wouldn't let him go so easily. Lake Lanier remains one of the most mysterious and dangerous places in America. The locals know the rule: stay away from its shores at night, and if you hear a voice calling you from the water, never answer. Have you ever experienced something unexplained? Share your stories in the comments. Subscribe to our channel and hit the like button to see more real stories of unexplainable events.